Most people think they're stuck because they lack discipline, or talent, or clarity. But that's not it. You're not stuck. You're surrounded. And the scariest part is, it doesn't feel like a problem. Ethan was 34 when he started noticing it. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It crept in quietly. Like a slow leak you don't detect until the pressure drops. On paper, his life was solid. Good job, stable routine, a tight circle of friends he'd known for years. The kind of people you don't question, the kind you assume are permanent. But something didn't sit right anymore. It wasn't his career. It wasn't his health. It was his energy. Every time he left a hangout, he didn't feel recharged. He felt dulled, like someone had turned down the sharpness of his thinking. At first he ignored it, blamed stress, work, sleep, but patterns don't lie. Same feeling, different days, same people. One night, after a long dinner filled with familiar jokes and predictable conversations, Ethan sat in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, and a thought slipped through that he couldn't shake. What if this version of my life isn't actually mine? That question hit harder than anything he had asked himself before. Because if it was true, then everything around him wasn't neutral. It was shaping him, quietly, consistently, without permission. The next few days, he stopped reacting and started observing. Not what people said on the surface, but what they reinforced underneath. Every conversation carried a pattern. When someone talked about starting something new, it was immediately met with doubt. When someone mentioned success, it was explained away by luck. When someone failed, it became a reason not to try. It wasn't aggressive. It was subtle, and that's why it worked. Because subtle influence doesn't trigger resistance, it becomes belief. That's when Ethan realized something that shifted everything. You don't become what you want, you become what your environment makes normal. And his environment had a very clear definition of normal. Stay safe, stay predictable, don't outgrow the group. That last one wasn't spoken, but it was enforced. Through tone, through jokes, through silence. The moment you aimed higher, something changed. People didn't attack you, they adjusted you. Why risk it? You're already doing fine. Don't overthink it. It sounded reasonable, but it wasn't guidance, it was gravity. Pulling him back to the same level everyone else had agreed to stay on. That night, Ethan didn't distract himself. No phone, no music, no noise, just silence. Because for the first time, he needed to hear something clearly, and in that silence, a structure began forming. Simple, but brutal in its honesty. 5 chairs. Every person in your life is sitting in one of them, not based on how long you've known them, not based on loyalty, based on what they do to your standard. Chair 1. The ones who drain you. They live in complaint, in blame, in excuses. Being around them doesn't just waste time, it lowers your baseline. Chair 2, the comfortable ones. Not negative, not toxic, just stagnant. They keep things easy. Familiar. Unchallenged. They don't push you forward. They keep you exactly where you are. Chair 3, the fillers. People who occupy space but don't affect direction. They're not harmful, but they're not helpful. They keep your life full, but not focused. Chair 4. The expanders. They think differently, move differently. Being around them feels uncomfortable because they expose the gap between who you are and who you could be. Chair 5. The rarest. The builders. Disciplined, precise, intentional. They don't talk about standards, they live them. And when you're around them, excuses feel embarrassing. Then came the realization that changed everything. You don't need to fix your entire life. You need to change who sits closest. Because proximity isn't neutral, it's permission. Whoever you spend the most time with defines what feels acceptable. Ethan looked at his life without filters. Most of his time was spent in Chair 1 and Chair 2, and suddenly, everything made sense. His lack of urgency, his inconsistent discipline, his quiet self-doubt. It wasn't a personality flaw, it was environmental conditioning. He had been calibrated to a lower standard, and expecting himself to operate above it. That doesn't work. Because willpower loses to environment every time. That night, he made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive, strategic. He wouldn't cut people off, he would reposition them. Because this isn't about loyalty, it's about influence. The next weekend, when the usual plans came in, he declined. No explanation, no drama, just a shift. Instead, he walked into a space he had been avoiding for months. A small networking event. Different people, different conversations, different energy. At first it felt wrong, like he didn't belong there. Like he was behind, like everyone else had already figured something out he hadn't, and for a moment, his mind pushed him to leave. Go back to comfort, back to familiarity, back to people who make you feel equal. But then something clicked. You're not supposed to feel equal here. You're supposed to feel stretched, because growth doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like exposure, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't walk away from that feeling. He stayed in it. That decision followed him home like a quiet echo. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. Because once you step into a different standard, your old world doesn't disappear. It waits for you, and when you return, it feels familiar, but not the same. Ethan noticed it immediately. Same group chat, same humor, same conversations looping like they always had. But this time, something felt off. Not them, him. He was hearing things differently now. When someone dismissed an idea, he didn't laugh along. He heard fear. When someone mocked ambition, he didn't join in. He saw insecurity protecting itself. When someone said, "That's just how life works," he didn't accept it. He recognized it. A script. And for the first time, he wasn't inside it. He was watching it. That's the moment everything begins to shift. Not when your environment changes, but when your awareness breaks the illusion. But awareness creates a new problem, because once you see clearly, staying the same becomes uncomfortable. And that discomfort demands a decision: adapt or retreat. At first, Ethan tried to balance both. He reduced time with certain people, but didn't fully step away. He explored new environments, but treated them like experiments: temporary, optional, safe. It felt like progress, but it wasn't, because partial change still protects your old identity, and your old identity will always pull you back to familiar chairs. Weeks passed in this in-between state, half growth, half comfort, and slowly, something dangerous started happening. His urgency faded, not completely. Just enough, because exposure without commitment creates illusion. You feel like you're changing without actually changing, and that illusion is one of the most comfortable traps you can fall into. Then came the pressure, subtle at first. "Where have you been lately? You've been quiet. You think you're too good for us now?" It came wrapped in humor, in sarcasm, in casual comments that didn't sound serious, but they were, because underneath every one of them was the same message: come back. Return to who you were, because your growth is disrupting the balance. And here's the truth: most people never say out loud. Not everyone benefits from your evolution. Some people rely on your consistency, your predictability, your sameness, because it protects their identity. And the moment you change, you force them to question theirs. Ethan felt that tension, not as conflict, but as weight. And for a moment, he hesitated. Because growth isn't just about improvement. It's about separation. Not physical distance, psychological distance. And that's harder, because it doesn't come with a clean break. It comes with quiet decisions, repeated daily, that slowly redefine who you are. He didn't make a speech, he didn't explain himself. He made a system, because identity doesn't change through emotion, it changes through structure. The 5-chair principle needed rules, not ideas. Not motivation, rules, so he built 3, simple but unforgiving. First rule: audit every interaction, not based on how it feels in the moment, but how it leaves you after every conversation, every hangout, every call. One question: did this raise my standard or lower it? No neutral answers, because neutral is often disguised decline. He started tracking it mentally. Patterns emerged fast. Certain people consistently left him sharper, others left him slower, more passive, more doubtful. Once you see that clearly, you can't ignore it. Second rule: reallocate proximity, not cut people off. Reassign access, because time is influence. Whoever gets your time gets to shape your thinking. Ethan didn't disappear from his old circle. He reduced exposure, shorter interactions, fewer shared environments, less availability. At the same time, he increased contact with higher standard rooms, events, communities. Conversations that felt uncomfortable but necessary. At first, it drained him, because growth requires energy, and he wasn't used to operating at that level. But something else started happening. His tolerance shifted. What once felt intimidating started feeling normal, and what once felt normal started feeling limiting. That's the recalibration, and it only happens through repeated exposure. Third rule: protect the new identity, because your old environment doesn't disappear. It waits, and it will test you. Through invitations, through nostalgia, through moments of weakness. So he built friction. He stopped engaging in conversations that lowered standards. He redirected discussions. He chose silence instead of agreement. And most importantly, he stopped explaining his decisions, because explanation invites negotiation, and growth is not negotiable. For a while this worked. Not perfectly, but powerfully. His thinking sharpened, his actions aligned, his energy changed, and for the first time, he felt something real: momentum. Not external success, internal direction. And that's where most people think the story stabilizes. It doesn't. Because just when you start moving forward, your past tests your consistency. It happened on a random evening. No warning. No build-up. He was exhausted, mentally drained. The new environments demanded more from him. More awareness. More effort, more presence, and his mind did what it always does under pressure. It looked for relief. So when an old friend texted, he said yes, just one night, just to relax, just to not think. That's what he told himself. And for a few hours, it worked. It felt easy. Familiar, comfortable, no expectations, no pressure, just laughter, old stories, predictable conversations, and for a moment, he felt like his old self again. But the next morning, something was off. His focus was weaker. His drive felt distant, his clarity blurred, and that's when it hit him. Environments don't just influence you while you're in them. They linger, they reset your baseline, silently, and if you're not careful, they pull you back further than you realize. That moment didn't break him, but it exposed something critical. You don't outgrow environments once. You outgrow them repeatedly, because regression doesn't feel like failure. It feels like comfort, and comfort is the easiest way back to who you used to be. That realization forced one final question, not about behavior, not about strategy, about identity. Who are you when no one is watching? That question didn't leave him. It followed him into the next day, into the next conversation, into the next decision. Because once identity becomes the focus, everything else becomes secondary. Not what you say, not what you plan, not what you intend, who you are, and more importantly, who you refuse to be. Ethan stopped looking at his environment as something external. He started seeing it as a mirror, because the truth is, your circle doesn't just shape you, it reflects you. Who you tolerate, who you prioritize, who you give access to. That's not accidental, that's identity in action. And for years, his identity had been built on comfort, on belonging, on maintaining connections, even when they no longer aligned. But growth demands a different standard. Not louder, not more aggressive, more precise. He realized something most people avoid. You don't drift into better environments. You decide into them, and that decision has a cost. Not everyone gets to come with you, not because they're bad, but because they're not aligned, and alignment is what shapes direction. So Ethan stopped negotiating with his past. Not emotionally, structurally. He didn't make announcements. He made adjustments that didn't require permission. He redesigned his weeks, who he saw, where he went, what conversations he allowed, what energy he entertained, and slowly, something powerful happened. His default state changed. Silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt intentional. Distance didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. And the need for constant validation started disappearing, because he wasn't building his identity from approval anymore. He was building it from standards, and standards don't need agreement. They need consistency. There were still moments of doubt. Of course there were. Moments where old memories pulled at him. Moments where it would have been easier to go back, to blend in, to stop resisting. But those moments didn't last, because he had seen too much, felt too much, understood too clearly what was at stake. This wasn't about social preference. This was about trajectory. Because 5 years from now, you won't become a completely different person. You'll become a slightly amplified version of who you are today. And who you are today is shaped by who you sit closest to. That's the part most people ignore. They focus on goals, on habits, on motivation, but they ignore the silent force controlling all of it. Proximity. Who you spend your time with doesn't just affect your mood. It programs your standards, and your standards determine your life. Ethan didn't chase motivation anymore. He engineered environment because he understood something simple. If you fix your environment, you don't have to fight yourself every day. Discipline becomes easier. Clarity becomes natural. Action becomes consistent. Not because you changed overnight, but because your surroundings stopped pulling you backwards. One evening months later, he found himself in a room that once intimidated him. High performers, focused minds, sharp conversations. The kind of environment that used to make him feel small. But this time, it felt different. Not because they changed, because he did. He wasn't trying to prove himself. He wasn't trying to fit in. He belonged there. Not by confidence, by calibration. His standards matched the room. And that's when he realized the full truth of the 5-chair principle. It's not about judging people. It's about choosing influence. It's not about cutting people off. It's about cutting unconscious exposure. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about removing everything that keeps you from becoming yourself. And most importantly, it's not a one-time decision. It's a continuous filter, because life will always present you with all 5 chairs. Every week, every environment, every phase, and your job isn't to eliminate them. Your job is to decide where you sit, because the chair you choose repeatedly becomes your identity, and your identity becomes your life. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like you're not moving, if you feel like something is off but you can't explain it, stop asking what's wrong with you. Start asking who you're sitting with, because you don't need more motivation, you need better proximity, and that decision is yours. Not someday, not when it's convenient. Now, choose your chair. And choose it like your future depends on it, because it does.